The screech of metal against metal pierced the autumn air as Marcus Chen pressed his face against the cold window of the northbound express train. His 8-year-old daughter Emma sat beside him, her small fingers tracing patterns in the condensation, while she hummed a tune from her favorite animated movie. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They were heading back to Portland after visiting Marcus's elderly mother in Seattle, a monthly ritual that had become even more precious since his wife Sarah had died 2 years ago in a car accident that still haunted his dreams. The train rounded a sharp curve through the dense Oregon forest, and Marcus felt that familiar tightness in his chest that came whenever he traveled this particular route. It was the same line Sarah had taken for her business trips. The same, a scenic journey through towering evergreens and misty valleys that she used to describe to him in loving detail over their evening phone calls. Now every mile of track felt like a painful reminder of conversations they would never have again. Emma shifted in her seat, pressing her nose against the glass as the landscape blurred past. "Daddy, why do the trees look like they're dancing?" she asked, her breath fogging the window. Marcus managed a smile, pushing aside his melancholy thoughts. "Maybe they're happy to see us pass by, sweetheart. Trees get lonely too, standing in the same spot all the time." "Like Grandma Rose?" Emma's innocent question hit him harder than expected. His mother had been increasingly isolated since his father's death 5 years earlier, living alone in the rambling Victorian house where Marcus had grown up. Each visit revealed new signs of her struggle with loneliness, and he'd been wrestling with the impossible decision of whether to move her to Portland or relocate his small architectural firm to Seattle. "Something like that," Marcus replied, smoothing Emma's dark hair that she'd inherited from Sarah, along with her mother's curious nature and gentle spirit. "But Grandma Rose has us, and we visit her every month, remember?" The train's whistle echoed through the forest as they approached the Cascade Bridge, a towering steel structure that spanned a deep gorge carved by centuries of rushing water. Marcus had always loved this part of the journey, the way the train seemed to float above the treetops, offering breathtaking views of the rugged landscape below. But today, something felt different. The train was moving faster than usual, and there was an undercurrent of tension in the air that made his skin prickle with unease. A commotion erupted several cars ahead, raised voices cutting through the rhythmic clacking of wheels on tracks. Marcus craned his neck to see what was happening, but the narrow aisle was crowded with passengers returning from the dining car. Emma looked up from her coloring book, her dark eyes wide with concern. "What's that noise, Daddy?" Before Marcus could answer, a woman's scream pierced the air, raw and desperate. It was followed by the sound of something heavy hitting the floor, then angry shouting that grew louder and more violent by the second. Other passengers began to murmur nervously, some standing in their seats to get a better view of the disturbance. Marcus felt his protective instincts surge. He'd been a volunteer firefighter in college and still maintained his emergency medical training, partly as a way to honor Sarah's memory since she'd been passionate about helping others in crisis situations. But with Emma beside him, his first priority was keeping his daughter safe. "Stay right here, Em," he instructed, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Don't move from this seat, okay? I need to check on something." Emma grabbed his hand, her small fingers surprisingly strong. "Don't go, Daddy. I'm scared." The fear in her voice almost made him sit back down, but another scream decided it for him. Someone was in serious trouble, and years of training had conditioned him to respond to emergencies. He kissed Emma's forehead and caught the attention of an elderly woman sitting across the aisle. "Could you please keep an eye on my daughter for just a moment?" he asked. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson, nodded without hesitation, moving to sit beside Emma. Marcus made his way forward through the swaying train car, his heart pounding as the shouting grew louder. He passed anxious families, clutching their children closer, business travelers looking up from their laptops with expressions of alarm, and elderly passengers whispering prayers under their breath. The atmosphere had shifted from peaceful travel to something approaching panic. As he reached the door leading to the next car, Marcus heard glass breaking, followed by a man's voice bellowing threats that made his blood run cold. The words were slurred with alcohol and rage, promising violence against someone who had apparently defied him. Marcus had heard that tone before during his volunteer work, responding to domestic violence calls, and it never failed to trigger his deepest protective instincts. He pushed through the connecting door and immediately saw the source of the chaos. Near the large observation windows at the front of the car, a massive man in an expensive suit was gripping a young woman's arm so tightly that his knuckles had gone white. The woman was perhaps 25, with auburn hair that had escaped from what was once an elegant updo and a navy dress that was now torn at the shoulder. Her face was pale with terror, but her green eyes blazed with defiance. "You think you can just walk away from me, Rebecca?" the man snarled, shaking her roughly. "After everything I've done for you, after all the money I've invested in your pathetic little art career." Rebecca tried to wrench free from his grasp, but he was easily twice her size. "Let go of me, David. We're over, and no amount of money or threats is going to change that." David's face flushed crimson with rage. "Nobody leaves me, especially not some ungrateful little nobody from nowhere. You're going to come back to Chicago with me, and you're going to be grateful for the privilege." Marcus sized up the situation quickly. David was clearly intoxicated, probably from the bar car, and his expensive clothing suggested wealth and the kind of entitlement that often came with it. Rebecca was trapped between him and the window, with nowhere to run, in the confined space of the train car. Other passengers had either fled to adjacent cars or were too frightened to intervene. "Sir," Marcus called out, keeping his voice calm, but firm, "I think you need to let the lady go and step away." David whirled around, his bloodshot eyes focusing on Marcus with difficulty. "This is none of your business, pal. This is between me and my fiancé." "I'm not your fiancé," Rebecca shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "I gave you back the ring 3 days ago. This is harassment." Marcus took a careful step closer, his hands visible and non-threatening. Years of de-escalating emergency situations had taught him the importance of projecting calm authority without appearing aggressive. "Look, I don't know what's going on between you two, but this isn't the place to work it out. There are families with children on this train." David's laugh was harsh and ugly. "Oh, we've got ourselves a hero, do we? Let me guess you think you're going to swoop in and save the damsel in distress." He tightened his grip on Rebecca's arm, making her wince in pain. "Well, here's a news flash, hero. Some damsels aren't worth saving." The train hit a particularly rough section of track, causing everyone to sway. Marcus used the momentary distraction to move closer, but David noticed and spun Rebecca around, so that her back was pressed against the large observation window. The gorge yawned below them, hundreds of feet of empty air between the bridge and the rocky canyon floor. "Don't come any closer," David warned, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "You wouldn't want poor Rebecca to have an accident, would you?" The threat was clear, and Marcus felt ice water flood his veins. This man was unhinged enough to actually hurt her, possibly even throw her from the train. The observation window was designed to withstand normal pressure, but not the force of a human body being slammed against it. "David, please," Rebecca whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're scaring me. This isn't you." "This is exactly me," David roared. "This is what happens when people cross me, when they take my money and my connections and then think they can just disappear." Whoa. Marcus realized he needed help, but the other passengers had either fled or were too terrified to assist. He thought of Emma, alone and frightened several cars back, and knew he had to end this quickly. His mind raced through possible approaches, discarding each one as too risky. That's when he noticed the emergency brake handle mounted on the wall near his position. It was marked with dire warnings about improper use, but this definitely qualified as an emergency. If he could create enough chaos to distract David, maybe Rebecca could break free. "You know what your problem is," Marcus said deliberately, raising his voice to mask the sound of his movement toward the brake. "You think money can buy you everything, but some things aren't for sale." David's eyes narrowed. "Everything's for sale if you know the right price. Love, loyalty, silence, I've bought them all." "Not from everyone," Marcus replied, his hand inching toward the emergency brake. "Some people have integrity." "Integrity?" David spat. "Integrity doesn't pay rent. Integrity doesn't get you into the right galleries or the right social circles. I gave Rebecca everything she needed to succeed, and this is how she repays me." Rebecca found her voice, stronger now despite her tears. "You gave me a cage, David. A beautiful, expensive cage, but still a cage. I'd rather fail on my own terms than succeed on yours." Her words seemed to snap something inside David. His face contorted with rage, and he grabbed Rebecca by both shoulders, pressing her harder against the window. "Then maybe it's time you learned what failure really looks like." Marcus didn't hesitate. He yanked the emergency brake handle with all his strength, and the train responded immediately. The sudden deceleration threw everyone forward, and David's grip on Rebecca loosened as he fought to maintain his balance. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing Rebecca and pulling her away from the window just as David stumbled backward. But David recovered faster than Marcus had anticipated. With a roar of fury, he charged forward, his considerable bulk carrying him straight toward them. Marcus managed to push Rebecca behind him, but there was nowhere to go in the narrow confines of the train car. The impact sent both men crashing into the observation window. Marcus heard the glass crack under their combined weight, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across the entire panel. David wrapped his hands around Marcus's throat, his face purple with rage. "You should have minded your own business," David snarled, squeezing harder. Marcus fought back, trying to break David's grip, but the larger man had all the advantages. Spots began to dance in Marcus's vision as his air supply was cut off. He thought of Emma, of his promise to Sarah that he would always protect their daughter, and desperation gave him strength. With his last bit of consciousness, Marcus drove his knee upward, connecting with David's solar plexus. The man doubled over, gasping, and his grip loosened just enough for Marcus to break free. But as they separated, David's momentum carried him backward into the already damaged window. The safety glass, weakened by their earlier impact, gave way with a sound like thunder. David's eyes went wide with shock as he felt himself falling, his hands scrabbling frantically for something to hold on to. He managed to grab the window frame, leaving him hanging halfway out of the train as it continued across the bridge. "Help me!" David screamed, all his earlier bravado gone. "Please, I don't want to die." Marcus didn't hesitate. Despite everything the man had done, he couldn't watch him fall to his death. He grabbed David's wrists, trying to pull him back into the train, but the angle was wrong, and David's weight was too much for one person to handle. "Rebecca, help me!" Marcus shouted over the wind howling through the broken window. Rebecca stepped forward, her face pale but determined. Together, they tried to haul David back to safety, but his grip was slipping on the smooth metal of the window frame. The train continued its relentless journey across the bridge, and below them, the gorge yawned like an open mouth. "I can't." "Hold on," David gasped, his face twisted with terror. "My hands are slipping." Marcus strained against David's weight, his muscles burning with the effort. This was someone who had just tried to kill him, who had terrorized Rebecca, but the thought of letting him fall was unthinkable. Sarah had always said that how you treated your enemies said more about your character than how you treated your friends. But physics was working against them. David's sweaty palms couldn't maintain their grip on the metal frame, and despite Marcus and Rebecca's combined efforts, they could feel him sliding away from them inch by inch. "Tell my mother I'm sorry," David whispered, his voice barely audible, over the wind. "Tell her I wasn't always like this." And then his hands slipped free, and he was gone, his scream swallowed by the wind as he plummeted toward the rocks below. Marcus collapsed against the wall, his hands shaking from exhaustion and shock. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rebecca sank to the floor beside him, sobbing quietly. Around them, other passengers were beginning to emerge from their hiding places, their faces white with horror at what they had witnessed. The train began to slow as the conductor responded to the emergency brake, but they were still on the bridge, still hundreds of feet above the gorge where David had fallen. Marcus thought of Emma, waiting for him in their car, and forced himself to stand. "Are you hurt?" he asked Rebecca, helping her to her feet. She shook her head, wiping tears from her eyes. "No, I'm okay. Thanks to you." She looked at the broken window, then back at Marcus. "You saved my life. That man was going to throw me off this train." Marcus felt sick thinking about how close they had come to tragedy. What was his problem? Who was he to you? Rebecca's expression darkened. "Someone I thought I loved, someone who turned out to be a monster." She shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. "His name was David Hartwell. He was a gallery owner in Chicago, very wealthy, very connected. When I met him 6 months ago, I thought he was my ticket to artistic success." She paused, looking out through the broken window at the forest rushing past below them. "But he didn't want a partner, or even a protege. He wanted to own me, to control every aspect of my life and career. When I finally tried to leave him 3 days ago, he threatened to destroy me, said he'd make sure I never worked in the art world again." Marcus listened, understanding now why David had been so enraged. Men like that didn't handle rejection well, especially when they thought their money entitled them to whatever they wanted. "Where were you going?" he asked gently. "Portland," Rebecca replied. "I have a friend there who said I could stay with her while I figure out my next move. David found out somehow and bought a ticket on the same train. He said if he couldn't have me, he'd make sure nobody else could either." The train finally came to a complete stop, and they could hear sirens in the distance. The conductor's voice crackled over the intercom, asking all passengers to remain calm while emergency personnel responded to the incident. Marcus realized he needed to get back to Emma before she became too frightened. "I have to check on my daughter," he told Rebecca. "She's alone in car 7. Rebecca nodded, then grabbed his arm as he turned to leave. "Wait, I don't even know your name. You risked your life for me, and I don't even know who you are." "Marcus Chen," he replied, "and I have a feeling this isn't over yet." As he made his way back through the train cars, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that David's death was just the beginning of something much larger and more complicated. The man had mentioned connections, influence, the kind of power that didn't simply disappear when its wielder died. If David Hartwell was as wealthy and connected as Rebecca claimed, there would be consequences to his death that none of them could yet imagine. He found Emma exactly where he had left her, sitting with Mrs. Patterson and clutching a small stuffed elephant that Sarah had given her shortly before the accident. Her face lit up when she saw him, and she threw herself into his arms. "Daddy, I heard scary noises and the train stopped, and Mrs. Patterson said there was an emergency." Marcus held her tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo and feeling grateful beyond words that she was safe. "It's okay, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus knew they weren't true. Through the window, he could see police cars and ambulances arriving at the scene, their flashing lights painting the forest in shades of red and blue. Soon, there would be questions, investigations, media attention. David Hartwell's death would not go unnoticed or uninvestigated. Mrs. Patterson patted his shoulder sympathetically. "You did the right thing, dear. I saw enough to know that man was dangerous. Sometimes good people have to do hard things to protect others." Marcus nodded gratefully, but his mind was already racing ahead to the complications that would follow. He thought about his architectural firm, his clients, his carefully ordered life in Portland. All of that was about to be turned upside down by what had happened on this bridge. Emma pulled back to look at him, her young face serious beyond her years. "Daddy, are you sad about something?" Marcus managed to smile, remembering Sarah's advice about always being honest with their daughter while protecting her innocence. "I'm just thinking about some grown-up things, Em. Nothing for you to worry about." "Is it about the loud man? Mrs. Patterson said he was being mean to a lady." Mrs. Patterson looked apologetic. She asked, and I thought it was better to give her a simple explanation than let her imagination run wild. Marcus appreciated the older woman's wisdom. "Yes, there was a man being mean to a lady, and I had to help her. But it's all over now." "Like when you help people at work?" Emma asked. Marcus had always explained his volunteer firefighting and emergency medical workers helping people, which Emma understood and supported even when it meant he had to leave at odd hours. "Something like that," Marcus agreed. Through the train windows, he could see emergency personnel setting up equipment to rappel down into the gorge where David had fallen. It would be hours before they could recover the body, and probably days before the investigation was complete. Marcus realized they would all be stuck here for the foreseeable future, giving statements to police and dealing with the media circus that was sure to follow. His phone buzzed with a text message, and he felt his heart sink when he saw it was from his business partner, Jake Morrison. The news of the incident was already spreading, and Jake had seen Marcus's name mentioned in early reports. "Dude, are you okay? The news is saying someone died on your train." Marcus quickly typed back, "Long story. Emma and I are fine. We'll call when I can." He looked around the train car, noting how other passengers were dealing with the aftermath. Some were on their phones, calling loved ones or posting updates on social media. Others sat in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed. A few were crying, overwhelmed by the proximity to sudden death. Rebecca appeared in the doorway of their car, having apparently given her initial statement to the police. She looked calmer now, though her clothes were still disheveled and there were dark circles under her eyes. When she spotted Marcus, she made her way over to them. "I wanted to thank you again," she said quietly, glancing at Emma, "and to let you know that the police want to speak with you as soon as possible. They said you're the primary witness to what happened." Marcus nodded, having expected as much. "Did they say how long this is going to take?" "Hours, probably. They have to process the scene, interview everyone who saw anything and coordinate with the medical examiner." Rebecca looked out the window at the growing crowd of emergency vehicles. There are already reporters showing up too. That was what Marcus had been dreading. The story of a heroic single father saving a woman from an abusive ex-boyfriend would be catnip for the media, especially with the dramatic setting of a train bridge and a fatal fall. His quiet life was about to become very public very quickly. Emma tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can we go home now? I want to see my room and my toys." "Not yet, sweetheart. We have to wait here a little while longer and talk to some police officers. But I promise we'll get home as soon as we can." Mrs. Patterson, who had been listening to their conversation, spoke up. "If it helps, I'd be happy to stay with Emma while you give your statement. I'm in no hurry to get anywhere, and she seems comfortable with me." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for the kindness of strangers. That would be incredibly helpful, thank you. Rebecca cleared her throat softly. Actually, I was wondering if I could talk to you privately for a moment. There's something about David that I think you should know before you speak to the police. Marcus looked at Emma, who was already deep in conversation with Mrs. Patterson about the older woman's collection of porcelain dolls. Okay, but just for a minute. They moved to the back of the car where they could speak without being overheard. Rebecca's expression was troubled, and she kept glancing around as if worried someone might be listening. David wasn't just some controlling boyfriend, she began quietly. He was connected to some very dangerous people, people who won't be happy that he's dead, especially if they think someone pushed him. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the broken window. What kind of people? The kind who launder money through art galleries and use intimidation to get what they want. David bragged about his connections to organized crime figures, said it was how he could guarantee that certain pieces would sell for astronomical prices. Rebecca's voice dropped even lower. He once told me that crossing him wouldn't just end my career, it would end my life. The implications of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. If David Hartwell had been connected to organized crime, then his death would trigger an investigation that went far beyond a simple train incident. There would be people who wanted answers, people who might not care whether David's death was accidental or justified. Why didn't you tell the police this? Marcus asked. I did, but they seemed more focused on the immediate circumstances of his death than his background. I don't think they understand what we might be dealing with. Rebecca met his eyes, her expression serious. Marcus, I'm scared that this isn't over. David's associates won't just write this off as a tragic accident. They'll want someone to blame. Marcus thought about Emma, about the life he'd built for them in Portland, about all the ways this could go wrong. But then he remembered the moment when David had been choking him, when he'd thought he might never see his daughter again, and he knew he'd made the only choice he could. We did the right thing, he said firmly. We tried to save him even after what he did. No one can blame us for what happened. Rebecca didn't look convinced. You don't know these people like I do. They don't care about right and wrong. They care about respect and reputation and making sure people know there are consequences for crossing them. Before Marcus could respond, a police officer appeared at the end of the car, scanning the passengers until his eyes settled on them. Marcus, Chen, we're ready for your statement now. Marcus squeezed Rebecca's hand briefly. We'll figure this out, but right now, we just need to tell the truth about what happened. As he followed the officer toward the front of the train, Marcus caught a glimpse of the scene outside. The bridge was now crowded with emergency vehicles, their lights reflecting off the metal structure like a chaotic light show. News vans were arriving, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers seeking the sun. In the distance, he could see helicopters circling over the gorge, probably news crews trying to get aerial footage of the recovery operation. By tomorrow, this story would be national news, and his name would be attached to it forever. He thought about Sarah, about how she would have handled this situation. She'd always been the calmer one in a crisis, the one who could see clearly when everything around them was chaos. He wished desperately that she was here now, that he could draw on her strength and wisdom. But Sarah was gone, and Marcus was on his own, with a frightened 8-year-old daughter and a situation that was growing more complicated by the hour. As he prepared to give his statement to the police, he made a silent promise to his late wife that he would protect Emma no matter what came next. He just hoped he would be strong enough to keep that promise. Detective Sarah Winters studied Marcus Chen's face as he finished recounting the events on the train bridge. 23 years in law enforcement had taught her to read people and Everything about this man screamed genuine trauma and reluctant heroism. His hands shook slightly as he reached for the coffee cup she'd provided, and his eyes kept drifting toward the window where his daughter waited with a victim's advocate. "Mr. Chen, I need to ask you directly," Detective Winters said, leaning forward across the small table in the makeshift interview room they'd set up in the train's dining car. "At any point during your struggle with Mr. Hartwell, did you intentionally push him toward the window?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "No, I was trying to get him away from Rebecca to de-escalate the situation. When he grabbed my throat, I fought back in self-defense, but I never intended for him to fall. When he was hanging from the window, I tried everything I could to pull him back inside." Detective Winters made a note in her pad. She'd already interviewed Rebecca Moore, whose account corroborated every detail of Marcus's story. The physical evidence supported their version of events as well. The broken safety glass showed impact patterns consistent with an accidental fall during a struggle, and there were no fingerprints or other signs that David Hartwell had been deliberately pushed. "What can you tell me about Mr. Hartwell's behavior? Before the incident, Ms. Moore mentioned he'd been drinking. He was definitely intoxicated, slurring his words and unsteady on his feet. But more than that, he seemed—" Marcus paused, searching for the right words. "Desperate, like someone who'd lost control and was willing to do anything to get it back. He wasn't just angry, he was panicked." That observation aligned with what Detective Winters had learned about David Hartwell's recent circumstances. Preliminary inquiries had revealed a man whose life was unraveling in spectacular fashion. His Chicago gallery was under investigation by the FBI for money laundering. His business partnerships were dissolving amid accusations of fraud, and several former artists had filed restraining orders against him for stalking and harassment. "Mr. Chen, I have to ask about Ms. Moore's allegations regarding Mr. Hartwell's criminal connections. She mentioned organized crime, money laundering through his gallery. Did he say anything during the incident that would support those claims?" Marcus frowned, trying to remember the exact words David had used during their confrontation. "He said something about buying love, loyalty, and silence, that everything was for sale if you knew the right price. It sounded like he was speaking from experience." Detective Winters nodded. The FBI had been building a case against Hartwell's gallery for months, part of a larger investigation into art market manipulation and financial crimes. His death would complicate that investigation, but it might also provide new opportunities to pursue his associates. "One more question, Mr. Chen. Do you have any reason to believe that Mr. Hartwell's associates might retaliate against you or Ms. Moore for his death?" The question Marcus had been dreading hung in the air between them. He thought about Rebecca's warnings, about the fear in her eyes when she described David's connections to dangerous people. "Ms. Moore seems to think it's possible. She knew him better than I did." "We're taking those concerns seriously," Detective Winters assured him. "We'll be coordinating with federal authorities and the Chicago PD to assess any potential threats. In the meantime, I'd recommend being extra cautious about your personal security." As if on cue, Marcus's phone buzzed with another message. He glanced at the screen and felt his stomach drop. It was from an unknown number, but the message made his blood run cold. "David Hartwell was under our protection. His death will not go unanswered." Detective Winters noticed his expression change. "Mr. Chen, is everything all right?" With shaking hands, Marcus showed her the message. Detective Winters immediately called for a forensics technician to examine the phone while placing calls to both the FBI and the Chicago field office. The investigation had just taken a dramatic turn. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to recommend that you and your daughter accept protective custody until we can assess the credibility of this threat. We can arrange for safe housing and—" "No!" Marcus interrupted firmly. Emma's been through enough trauma in her life. I won't hide from these people or disrupt her life any more than it's already been disrupted. Detective Winters understood his position, but she'd seen what organized crime figures were capable of when they wanted revenge. Then at least let us assign a protective detail. Plainclothes officers who can keep an eye on you and your daughter without being obvious about it. Marcus considered the offer. The rational part of his mind knew that accepting protection was the smart choice, but another part of him rebelled against the idea of living in fear. Sarah had always taught him that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the determination to do what was right, despite being afraid. "What about Rebecca?" he asked. "If I'm at risk, she's certainly at risk too. Miss Moore has already agreed to protective custody. She'll be relocated to a safe house until we can determine the scope of the threat." Detective Winters studied Marcus's face. "Mr. Chen, these people killed a federal judge in Miami last year for sentencing one of their associates. They don't make idle threats." That information changed Marcus's perspective considerably. Emma's safety had to be his top priority, even if it meant temporarily disrupting their lives. "Okay," he said finally. "What do we need to do?" The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Federal agents arrived from Seattle, bringing with them files on David Hartwell's known associates and a comprehensive threat assessment. What they revealed painted a picture of a criminal organization that was far more sophisticated and dangerous than Marcus had imagined. Agent Jennifer Torres, a specialist in organized crime with the FBI, briefed Marcus on the situation while Emma played with coloring books in an adjacent room under the watchful eye of a female agent who'd been introduced as Aunt Jen's friend from work. David Hartwell was what we call a facilitator, Agent Torres explained. He used his legitimate gallery business to clean money for a crime family based in Chicago and Detroit. But more than that, he was their entry point into high society, their connection to wealthy collectors and influential people who didn't ask too many questions about provenance. She showed Marcus a photograph of a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. "This is Vincent Carlucci, the head of the organization. He's been on our radar for 15 years, but he's extremely careful, never gets his hands dirty personally, always maintains plausible deniability." Marcus studied the photograph, noting the cold intelligence in Carlucci's eyes. "And he's the one who might be coming after Rebecca and me." "Possibly. Hartwell's death creates problems for Carlucci beyond just losing a business partner. If our investigation into the gallery proceeds without Hartwell's cooperation, we might uncover evidence that could finally take down the whole organization." Agent Torres paused. "Carlucci has a reputation for eliminating problems before they become threats." The implications were clear. Marcus and Rebecca weren't just witnesses to an accidental death. They were potential threats to a criminal empire, worth millions of dollars. Even if they had no intention of cooperating with law enforcement beyond what they'd already done, Carlucci couldn't afford to take that risk. "What's the plan?" Marcus asked. "For now, we're moving you and your daughter to a safe location. We've identified a secure facility about an hour north of Portland where you can stay while we assess the threat level and develop a longer-term strategy." Marcus thought about his architectural firm, his clients, his mother in Seattle who would be expecting their monthly visit. His entire life was about to be put on hold because of a few minutes of violence on a train bridge. "How long are we talking about?" Agent Torres's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "Could be weeks, could be months. It depends on how quickly we can develop actionable intelligence about Carlucci's intentions and capabilities." Emma appeared in the doorway, her stuffed elephant tucked under one arm and a crayon drawing in her hand. "Daddy, I drew a picture of the train, but I didn't draw the scary part, just the pretty trees. Marcus's heart ached as he looked at his daughter's innocent artwork. She had no idea that their lives had been permanently altered by the events of this day, that they might not be going home to their comfortable house in Portland for a very long time. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, accepting the drawing and giving her a hug. "Why don't you go back and draw some more pictures while Daddy finishes talking to the nice agents?" After Emma returned to her coloring, Agent Torres continued. "The briefing. We've been in contact with Rebecca Moore, and she's provided us with additional information about Hartwell's operations. Apparently, he kept detailed records of his illegal transactions, including names of buyers and sellers involved in money laundering schemes. Where are these records?" "That's the problem. Ms. Moore says they're in a safe in Hartwell's private office at the gallery, but we haven't been able to secure a warrant yet. His lawyers are fighting our requests, claiming attorney-client privilege and challenging our probable cause." Marcus saw the frustration in Agent Torres's face. Without access to Hartwell's records, the FBI's investigation would stall, giving Carlucci time to eliminate potential witnesses and cover his tracks. "What does this mean for Rebecca and me?" "It means you're both in danger until we can either arrest Carlucci and his associates or convince them that you're not a threat to their operations." Agent Torres closed the file she'd been referencing. "I have to be honest with you, Mr. Chen. This isn't going to be easy or quick." As if to emphasize her point, Marcus's phone buzzed again with another message from the unknown number. "We know where you live. We know about your daughter's school. Cooperation would be wise." Agent Torres immediately confiscated the phone and called for additional security measures. Within minutes, the area around the train was flooded with federal agents, local police, and tactical teams. The threat had escalated from general intimidation to specific menacing, and everyone's safety was now in immediate jeopardy. "That's it," Agent Torres declared. "We're moving you now. No more delays, no more discussions." The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. Marcus and Emma were hustled into an unmarked SUV with tinted windows, surrounded by a convoy of law enforcement vehicles. As they drove through the Oregon countryside, Marcus tried to process everything that had happened in the span of a single day. This morning, he'd been a single father taking his daughter home from a routine visit to her grandmother. Tonight, he was in federal protective custody, running from criminals who viewed him as a threat to their multi-million-dollar empire. The irony wasn't lost on him that trying to save someone's life had put his own daughter in danger. Emma fell asleep against his shoulder as they drove, exhausted by the emotional trauma of the day. Marcus stroked her hair and made silent promises that he would find a way to keep her safe, no matter what it cost him personally. The safe house turned out to be a modest ranch home set on several acres of forested land north of Portland. It was surrounded by sophisticated security systems and staffed by armed federal agents who tried to maintain an atmosphere of normalcy while remaining vigilantly alert for any signs of trouble. Agent Torres showed them to their rooms, which had been hastily prepared with basic necessities and some toys for Emma. "I know this isn't ideal," she said apologetically, "but it's temporary and it's secure." Marcus appreciated her efforts, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were now prisoners of their own good intentions. By saving Rebecca's life, he'd inadvertently triggered a chain of events that threatened to destroy everything he'd worked to build since Sarah's death. "Agent Torres, I need to ask you something," Marcus said as they stood in the hallway outside Emma's room. "How did these people get my phone number? I'm not exactly a public figure." The agent's expression grew, troubled. "That's what concerns us too. It suggests they have access to information that should be secure, possibly through law enforcement channels or telecommunications systems." The implication was chilling. If Carlucci's organization had sources within law enforcement or government agencies, then no location was truly safe. Marcus felt a growing sense of paranoia, wondering who could be trusted and who might be feeding information to their enemies. That night, as Emma slept peacefully in the unfamiliar bed, Marcus stood at the window of their temporary sanctuary and stared out at the dark forest. Somewhere out there, dangerous people were planning their next move, trying to figure out how to eliminate the threat he represented. He thought about Rebecca, wondering if she was having similar thoughts in her own safe house. She'd warned him that David's death wouldn't be the end of their troubles, and she'd been absolutely right. In trying to save her life, Marcus had stumbled into a world of corruption and violence that he was completely unprepared to navigate. His phone, now a different device provided by the FBI, rang softly. Agent Torres's voice was tense when he answered. "Mr. Chen, we've had a development. Someone broke into Rebecca Moore's apartment in Chicago tonight. They didn't take anything valuable, but they tore the place apart, looking for something specific." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Was Rebecca there? No. She's safe in our custody, but this confirms that Carlucci's people are actively searching for information, probably trying to determine how much you and Ms. Moore know about Hartwell's operations. What happens now? We accelerate our timeline. We can't wait for Carlucci to make the first move. We need to go on the offensive and try to get ahead of this situation before it spirals completely out of control. Agent Torres paused, and Marcus could hear other voices in the background discussing strategies and options. When she came back on the line, her tone was grimly determined. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to ask something of you that you're not going to like. But it might be the only way to protect your daughter and end this threat." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you need me to do?" "We want you to help us set a trap for Carlucci. Use yourself as bait to draw him out into the open, where we can arrest him and his associates." The request hung in the air like a physical weight. Agent Torres was asking Marcus to voluntarily put himself in mortal danger, to trust that federal law enforcement could protect him from killers who had successfully evaded justice for decades. "And if something goes wrong?" Marcus asked quietly. "If your plan fails and these people kill me, what happens to Emma?" "We've considered that possibility," Agent Torres admitted. "We have contingency plans in place to ensure your daughter's safety regardless of the outcome. But Mr. Chen, if we don't stop Carlucci now, you and your daughter will be looking over your shoulders for the rest of your lives." Marcus thought about Emma sleeping peacefully in the next room, about the life he wanted to give her, about the legacy Sarah would have wanted him to leave their daughter. He thought about Rebecca, who had already lost so much to David Hartwell's abuse and manipulation. What exactly would this trap involve? Agent Torres outlined a plan that was both simple and terrifying in its implications. Marcus would be moved to a less secure location, creating the appearance of a vulnerability that Carlucci's people could exploit. When they made their move, federal agents would be waiting to arrest them. "The risk is significant," Agent Torres acknowledged, "but we believe it's our best chance to end this threat quickly and decisively." Marcus stared out at the dark forest, weighing options that all seemed to lead to danger. In the end, the choice came down to a simple question. What kind of example did he want to set for his daughter? Did he want her to learn that good people hid from evil, or that they faced it with courage and determination? "All right," Marcus said finally. "I'll do it, but I want guarantees about Emma's safety, and I want to talk to Rebecca before we proceed. If we're both putting our lives on the line, we should at least coordinate our efforts." "Agreed. We'll arrange a secure communication with Ms. Moore tomorrow morning, and we'll brief you both on the operational details." After ending the call, Marcus checked on Emma one more time, adjusting her blankets and kissing her forehead. She looked so small and vulnerable in the strange bed, completely trusting that her father would keep her safe from the dangers of the adult world. Marcus made another silent promise to Sarah and to their daughter. Whatever happened in the coming days, he would find a way to end this threat and give Emma the peaceful childhood she deserved. Even if it cost him everything, he would not let the darkness that had claimed David Hartwell destroy their family's future. As he finally tried to sleep, Marcus's mind raced with questions and fears about what lay ahead. The next phase of this nightmare was about to begin, and there was no guarantee that any of them would survive it intact. But for the first time, since the incident on the train bridge, Marcus felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. He was no longer just a victim of circumstances beyond his control. He was choosing to fight back, to take an active role in protecting the people he loved and bringing justice to those who threatened them. The transformation from reluctant hero to willing warrior was complete, and Marcus Chen was ready for whatever it came next. The secure video conference room felt sterile and cold as Marcus stared at the screen showing Rebecca's face from her own safe house location. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her auburn hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail that made her look younger and more vulnerable than she had on the train. Agent Torres sat beside Marcus, while another federal agent, whom Rebecca introduced as Agent Martinez, flanked her on the other end of the connection. "How are you holding up?" Marcus asked, noting the tension in Rebecca's shoulders and the way her hands fidgeted with a coffee cup that appeared to be her lifeline. "I've been better," Rebecca replied with a weak smile. "Finding out that your ex-boyfriend was laundering money for the mob tends to put things in perspective. How's Emma handling all this?" Marcus glanced toward the door where he could hear his daughter's laughter echoing from the common area where she was playing board games with one of the female agents. "She thinks we're on an adventure. I'm trying to keep it that way for as long as possible." Agent Torres cleared her throat, refocusing their attention on the matter at hand. "We need to discuss the operational plan. Both of you are essential to making this work, but we need your full commitment before we proceed." Rebecca leaned forward, her expression serious. "Before we agree to anything, I need to know more about Vincent Carlucci." David used to brag about his connections, but he was always vague about details. "What exactly are we dealing with?" Agent Martinez consulted his files before responding. "Vincent Carlucci has been the head of what we call the Midwest Arts Syndicate for the past 12 years. They specialize in using high-end art sales to launder money from various criminal enterprises, including drug trafficking, human trafficking, and extortion. Carlucci himself is highly intelligent, methodical, and completely ruthless." The agent clicked through several photographs on his tablet, showing images of crime scenes and newspaper headlines. In the past 5 years, at least 7 people who posed threats to his organization have died under suspicious circumstances. Car accidents, apparent suicides, drug overdoses. Nothing we could ever prove in court, but the pattern is clear. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he absorbed the information. And David Hartwell was working for this man? "More than working for him," Agent Torres interjected. "Hartwell was Carlucci's primary interface with legitimate society. His gallery provided the perfect cover for money laundering operations, and his connections in the art world gave Carlucci access to wealthy collectors who were willing to pay inflated prices for pieces with questionable provenance." Rebecca's face had gone pale as she listened to the briefing. "David always had more money than his gallery should have generated, and he knew collectors who would buy pieces without asking questions about authentication or history. I thought it was just good business connections. The art world is particularly vulnerable to these kinds of schemes," Agent Martinez explained. "Value is subjective, documentation can be forged, and transactions often involve significant amounts of cash. It's an ideal vehicle for cleaning dirty money." Marcus tried to process the scope of what they were dealing with. So when David died, Carlucci didn't just lose a business partner, he lost his entire entry point into a lucrative criminal enterprise. Exactly. And worse, from Carlucci's perspective, there are now witnesses who could potentially testify about Hartwell's operations if we ever get him to trial. Agent Torres pulled up a map on her tablet showing locations across the Midwest. We believe Carlucci is personally overseeing the response to Hartwell's death. He's not the type to delegate something this important. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably in her chair. There's something else you should know about David's records. He didn't just keep transaction details in his office safe. He had a secondary location where he stored backup copies of everything. Both federal agents sat up straighter at this revelation. Agent Martinez leaned forward intently. Where? His lake house in Wisconsin. He took me there once about 3 months ago. He had a hidden room behind his wine cellar where he kept files, hard drives, even physical samples of forged documentation. Rebecca's voice grew quieter. He showed it to me like it was some kind of trophy room. I think he enjoyed having evidence of all the illegal things he'd done. Agent Torres and Agent Martinez exchanged meaningful glances. This was the kind of intelligence breakthrough that could make or break their case against Carlucci. Ms. Moore, would you be able to locate this hidden room and identify the materials stored there? Agent Torres asked. I think so. David was very proud of his security system. He walked me through the whole process of accessing the room. Rebecca paused, clearly understanding the implications of what she was suggesting. But getting to that, Lake House would mean exposing myself to significant danger. Marcus found himself speaking before he fully considered his words. We're already in significant danger. At least this way, we'd be taking an active role in ending the threat instead of just hiding and hoping it goes away. Agent Martinez nodded approvingly. That's exactly the kind of thinking that could make this operation successful. But I want both of you to understand the risks involved. We're talking about deliberately putting yourselves in harm's way to gather evidence against one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the Midwest. The room fell silent as Marcus and Rebecca absorbed the weight of what was being proposed. Marcus thought about Emma, about the life he wanted to give her, about the example Sarah would have wanted him to set. Sometimes protecting the people you loved meant taking calculated risks to eliminate long-term threats. What would the operation look like? Marcus asked. Agent Torres outlined a complex plan that would unfold over several days. Marcus would be moved to a less secure location in Chicago, creating the appearance that he was vulnerable to approach by Carlucci's operatives. Meanwhile, Rebecca would be transported to Wisconsin under heavy but covert protection, where she would attempt to access the hidden room at Hartwell's lake house and retrieve the backup files. The goal is to force Carlucci into making a move against Mr. Chen while simultaneously gathering evidence that could definitively link him to Hartwell's money laundering operations, Agent Torres explained. If we can coordinate both elements successfully, we'll have enough evidence to arrest Carlucci and dismantle his entire organization. Rebecca looked skeptical. And if Carlucci decides to just have Marcus killed instead of trying to capture him for information? That's where careful planning and overwhelming tactical support come into play, Agent Martinez replied. Mr. Chen would never be truly alone or unprotected, but from Carlucci's perspective, it would appear that way. Marcus considered the plan from every angle he could think of. The risks were enormous, but so were the potential rewards. If they succeeded, Emma could grow up without the shadow of criminal retaliation hanging over their family. If they failed, she might grow up without a father. I need to think about this, Marcus said finally. I need to consider what this means for Emma, and I need to talk to some people. "Who did you have in mind?" Agent Torres asked, her tone suggesting that any communications would need to be carefully monitored and controlled. "My business partner, Jake Morrison. He's been handling my firm while I've been dealing with this situation, and my mother in Seattle. She's expecting us for our monthly visit, and she's going to worry if we just disappear." Agent Torres nodded understandingly. "We can arrange supervised communications with both of them, but understand that we can't reveal operational details or specific locations." After the video conference ended, Marcus spent the afternoon walking the grounds of the safe house while Emma played with the therapy dog that one of the agents had brought for her entertainment. The autumn air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine needles and wood smoke from a distant fireplace. Under different circumstances, he would have found the setting peaceful and restorative. Instead, he found himself analyzing sightlines and escape routes, wondering if hidden snipers were watching from the tree line, calculating how quickly threats could materialize from multiple directions. The paranoia was exhausting, but it seemed necessary given the circumstances. His secure phone rang, and Agent Torres's voice carried a note of urgency that immediately put him on alert. "Mr. Chen, we've had another development. Someone attempted to break into your architectural firm's office in Portland last night." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Was anyone hurt? What did they take?" "No injuries, and they didn't actually get inside. Your partner, Jake Morrison, happened to be working late and scared them off when he turned on the lights, but they left behind some interesting surveillance equipment." The implications were clear. Carlucci's people were expanding their intelligence, gathering operations, trying to learn everything they could about Marcus's life, his connections, his potential vulnerabilities. Jake's inadvertent intervention might have saved valuable information from falling into criminal hands. "I need to talk to Jake," Marcus said firmly. "He deserves to know what's happening and why his business is being targeted." "Agreed. We'll set up a secure call this evening, but Mr. Chen, this incident reinforces our assessment that Carlucci views you as a significant threat. He's investing considerable resources in gathering intelligence about you." After ending the call, Marcus found Emma in the common area, carefully coloring a picture of a rainbow, while the therapy dog, a gentle golden retriever named Buster, dozed at her feet. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting up with the innocent joy that had become his anchor in this sea of uncertainty. "Daddy, look, I made the rainbow have extra colors because I think rainbows should be more exciting." Marcus examined her artwork, noting the creative additions of silver and gold stripes among the traditional spectrum. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. You're absolutely right that rainbows should be more exciting." Emma set down her crayons and looked at him with the serious expression that always reminded him so much of Sarah. "Daddy, are we going to stay here forever?" The question he'd been dreading hung in the air between them. Marcus sat down beside his daughter, choosing his words carefully. "No, Em. This is just temporary while some grown-ups work out some complicated problems. But I promise you that we'll go home as soon as it's safe. Is someone trying to hurt us?" Marcus had always tried to be honest with Emma while protecting her innocence, a balance that Sarah had helped him learn during her final months when cancer had forced them to discuss difficult topics with their young daughter. "Some people are angry about what happened on the train when I helped that lady, but there are good people working very hard to make sure we stay safe." Emma nodded solemnly, accepting his explanation with the resilience that had carried her through her mother's death and all the challenges that followed. "Okay, but can we bring Buster home with us when we go? He's really good at making people feel better." The innocent request brought tears to Marcus's eyes as he realized how much this situation was affecting his daughter, despite his efforts to shield her from the worst of it. "We'll see, sweetheart. We'll definitely ask." That Evening, the secure video call with Jake Morrison was both a relief and a source of additional stress. Jake's familiar face on the screen provided a connection to normalcy, but the worry in his eyes reflected the growing impact of Marcus's situation on everyone around him. "Marcus, what the hell is going on?" Jake asked without preamble. "I've got FBI agents asking questions about our business, unknown people trying to break into our office, and clients calling to ask if you're involved in some kind of criminal investigation." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility for dragging his innocent business partner into a dangerous situation. "Jake, I'm sorry you're caught up in this. I never intended for it to affect the firm or put you at risk. Forget about the business for a minute. Are you and Emma safe? The agents wouldn't tell me much, but they made it clear that you're both in some kind of protective custody." Agent Torres, who was monitoring the call, nodded permission for Marcus to share general details about the situation. He explained about the incident on the train, David Hartwell's criminal connections, and the threats that had forced them into hiding. Jake listened in stunned silence before responding. "Jesus, Marcus, you saved someone's life, and now you're being hunted by the mob. This is insane." Marcus nodded absently, his attention divided between her instructions and the encrypted messages flowing across his secure tablet from Rebecca's team in Wisconsin. She had successfully infiltrated David Hartwell's lake house compound under the cover of the documentary film crew, but accessing the hidden vault was proving more challenging than anticipated. The latest update from Agent Martinez was terse but concerning. Security system more sophisticated than expected, may need additional time to bypass without triggering alarms. Time was something they didn't have in abundance. Intelligence. Reports indicated that Vincent Carlucci had arrived in Chicago that morning with an entourage that included his most trusted enforcers. The crime boss was personally overseeing the response to David Hartwell's death, a clear indication of how seriously he viewed the threat posed by potential witnesses. Marcus's phone buzzed with an incoming call from the number that had been leaked to Carlucci's organization through carefully controlled channels. Agent Torres immediately signaled to the surveillance team, and Marcus could feel the weight of dozens of hidden eyes and ears focusing on his every word and gesture. "Marcus Chen," he answered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Mr. Chen, my name is Anthony Rossetti. I represent certain business interests that were affected by the unfortunate incident on the train. I'd like to meet with you to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement." The voice was cultured and calm, with just a hint of an East Coast accent that suggested education and refinement. But Marcus had been briefed on Anthony Rossetti, Carlucci's primary negotiator and the man responsible for making problems disappear through a combination of bribery, intimidation, and violence. "I'm not sure what we would have to discuss, Mr. Rossetti. I've already given my statement to the police about what happened." "Mr. Chen, I think you underestimate the complexities of the situation you found yourself in. There are aspects of David Hartwell's business relationships that you may not fully understand, relationships that could have significant implications for your future well-being. The threat was delivered with the smooth professionalism of a corporate executive, but its meaning was unmistakable." Marcus glanced at Agent Torres, who nodded encouragingly while monitoring the conversation through multiple recording devices. "What kind of implications?" "The kind that are better discussed in person, away from the electronic ears that seem to be everywhere these days. I'm staying at the Fairmont Hotel, just a few blocks from your current location. Perhaps we could meet for coffee in their lobby cafe this evening?" Marcus felt his pulse quicken. The meeting request meant that Carlucci's people had not only identified his location, but were confident enough in their intelligence to propose a face-to-face encounter. It was exactly what the FBI had hoped for, but it also meant the operation was entering its most dangerous phase. "I suppose I could spare an hour," Marcus replied, trying to project the nervousness of an ordinary citizen caught up in events beyond his control. "What time did you have in mind?" "Shall we say 7 o'clock? And Mr. Chen, I'd recommend coming alone. My associates and I value privacy in our business discussions." After ending the call, Marcus turned to Agent Torres with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "They're moving faster than we expected." That's actually good news," Agent Torres replied, though her expression remained tense. "It means they're feeling pressure to resolve this situation quickly, which could lead them to make mistakes." She activated her communication headset and began coordinating with the tactical teams positioned throughout the downtown area. "All units, we have confirmation of the meet. Target time is 1900 hours at the Fairmont Lobby Cafe. Begin final positioning and equipment checks." Marcus listened to the flood of responses from hidden agents acknowledging their assignments. Snipers on rooftops, surveillance teams in nearby buildings, undercover operatives posing as hotel guests, and cafe customers. The entire downtown core was being transformed into an elaborate trap designed to capture one of the most dangerous crime bosses in the Midwest. His secure tablet chimed with another update from Wisconsin, and this time, the news was more encouraging. Rebecca had successfully bypassed the outer security systems at Hartwell's Lake House and was now working on accessing the hidden vault behind the wine cellar. "Making progress on primary objective," Agent Martinez reported. "Subject has located the concealed entrance and is attempting to crack the secondary lock system. Estimate 30 minutes to completion." Agent Torres read the message over Marcus's shoulder and allowed herself a tight smile. "If Rebecca can retrieve those files while we're meeting with Rossetti, we'll have enough evidence to take down Carlucci's entire organization." The coordination required was staggering. 2 simultaneous operations in different states, each dependent on split-second timing and flawless execution. Any mistake by either team could result in the failure of both missions, and potentially deadly consequences for everyone involved. Marcus spent the remaining hours before the meeting reviewing the operational plan and trying to maintain the appearance of a nervous amateur while actually preparing for what could be the most dangerous encounter of his life. Agent Torres had equipped him with a nearly invisible communication device and recording equipment, but his primary protection would come from the army of federal agents positioned throughout the area. As the sun began to set over Chicago's skyline, painting the glass towers in shades of gold and crimson, Marcus made his way through the hotel's marble lobby toward the elevator that would take him to street level. Other guests moved around him, with the casual confidence of people whose biggest worry was making dinner reservations or catching evening flights. Marcus envied their ignorance of the life and death drama unfolding around them. In less than an hour, he would be sitting across from a man who had ordered the deaths of countless people, trying to project vulnerability while secretly working to gather evidence that could finally bring that man to justice. The walk to the Fairmont Hotel took 12 minutes through Chicago's bustling financial district. Marcus forced himself to move at a normal pace, fighting the urge to scan the shadows for potential threats or allies. He knew that dozens of hidden cameras were tracking his progress, that tactical teams were adjusting their positions to maintain optimal coverage. But the illusion of isolation was nearly perfect. The Fairmont's lobby cafe was elegantly appointed with leather banquettes and warm lighting that created an atmosphere of sophisticated comfort. Marcus spotted Anthony Rossetti immediately, seated at a corner table that provided clear sightlines to all entrances while keeping his back protected by a solid wall. Rossetti was exactly what Marcus had expected from the FBI briefings. Impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, silver, hair styled with mathematical precision, and the kind of confident bearing that came from wielding power over life and death for decades. "Mr. Chen, thank you for coming," Rossetti said, rising to shake hands with a grip that was firm but not aggressive. "Please, sit. I took the liberty of ordering coffee for both of us." Marcus settled into the chair across from Rossetti, acutely aware that this polite gentleman had probably ordered the deaths of more people than Marcus could imagine. The cognitive dissonance between Rossetti's cultured demeanor and his violent profession was unsettling. "I have to admit, Mr. Rossetti, I'm not entirely sure why you wanted to meet. The incident on the train was tragic, but it was also clearly self-defense. The police have already closed their investigation." Rossetti's smile was practiced and revealing nothing of his true thoughts. "Mr. Chen, you strike me as an intelligent man, so I'm going to speak frankly. David Hartwell was more than just an art dealer. He was a valued partner in certain business ventures that generated significant revenue for my associates and me." The admission was carefully calibrated, Marcus realized. Rossetti was confirming criminal connections while stopping short of anything that could be used as evidence in court. "I know it sounds crazy, but it's our reality right now. The question is whether I should take an active role in helping the FBI end this threat or continue hiding until they can resolve it through other means." "What kind of active role?" Marcus explained the basics of the proposed operation, carefully avoiding specific details that might compromise security. Jake's expression grew increasingly concerned as he absorbed the implications. "Marcus, you're talking about using yourself as bait to catch killers. What happens to Emma if something goes wrong?" The question that haunted Marcus's every waking moment hung between them. "The FBI has assured me that Emma would be protected regardless of what happens to me. But Jake, if I don't take this chance to end the threat, Emma and I could be looking over our shoulders for the rest of our lives." Jake was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus could see him wrestling with the complexity of the situation. Finally, he spoke with the conviction that had made him such a valuable business partner over the years. "Marcus, in all the time I've known you, you've never backed down from doing what you thought was right, even when it was difficult or dangerous. Remember when you testified against that contractor who was using substandard materials? You got death threats then too, but you didn't let it stop you from protecting public safety." Marcus remembered the incident Jake was referencing. It seemed trivial now compared to his current situation, but the principle was the same. Sometimes doing the right thing required accepting personal risk to protect others. "This is different, Jake. That contractor was a local bully, not a professional killer. The scale is different, but the choice is the same. You can either let evil people intimidate you into silence, or you can stand up and fight back." Jake's expression was earnest and supportive. "I've seen how you've raised Emma, the values you've taught her about courage and integrity. What kind of lesson would you be teaching her if you chose to hide when you had the chance to stop these people from hurting other families?" The conversation with Jake crystallized something that had been forming in Marcus's mind since the video conference with Rebecca. This wasn't just about his family's safety anymore. It was about taking responsibility for the consequences of his actions and ensuring that other innocent people didn't suffer because he was too afraid to see this through to its conclusion. After ending the call with Jake, Marcus requested another conversation with Agent Torres. They met in the secure briefing room where maps and photographs of criminal suspects covered every available wall surface. "I've made my decision," Marcus announced without preamble. "I'll participate in your operation, but I have conditions." Agent Torres leaned forward attentively. "I'm listening." "First, I want detailed contingency plans for Emma's safety and care if something happens to me. I want to know exactly who would be responsible for her, where she would live, how her education and emotional needs would be addressed. Understood. We can arrange those details. Second, I want to be involved in planning every aspect of the operation that affects my safety. I'm not going to be a passive participant in something that could get me killed. Agent Torres nodded approvingly. Your insights and instincts could actually improve our operational planning. That's a reasonable request. Third, I want regular updates on Rebecca's progress and safety. If we're both risking our lives for this operation, we should be coordinating our efforts as much as possible. Also reasonable. Any other conditions? Marcus thought about Emma, about Sarah, about the life he wanted to build for his family. I want a guarantee that if this operation succeeds and Carlucci is arrested, my family's involvement will be kept as confidential as possible. Emma shouldn't have to grow up with everyone knowing that her father was involved in bringing down a crime family. We can't control all media coverage, but we can certainly minimize official disclosures and work to protect your family's privacy. Marcus stood and extended his hand to Agent Torres. Then let's do this, but let's do it right. Over the next 2 days, Marcus immersed himself in operational planning with an intensity that surprised the federal agents. His architectural background proved valuable in analyzing building layouts and escape routes, while his emergency medical training helped him understand tactical scenarios and contingency planning. The plan that emerged was sophisticated and multi-layered. Marcus would be moved to a hotel in downtown Chicago, ostensibly to meet with lawyers about potential civil litigation related to David Hartwell's death. The location would be leaked through carefully controlled channels, creating the appearance that he was vulnerable while actually surrounding him with covert protection. Meanwhile, Rebecca would be transported to Wisconsin by a team of agents posing as a documentary film crew, scouting locations for a movie about lake houses. Her mission would be to access Hartwell's hidden files and transmit copies to the FBI before Carlucci's people realized what was happening. The coordination required split-second timing and flawless communication between multiple teams operating in different states. Any mistake could result in the death of innocent people and the collapse of the entire investigation into Carlucci's organization. On the evening before the operation was scheduled to begin, Marcus sat beside Emma's bed as she fell asleep, reading her favorite story about a brave princess who saved her kingdom from a terrible dragon. As he reached the part where the princess faced her greatest fear to protect the people she loved, Emma's sleepy voice interrupted him. "Daddy, are you going to be like the princess?" Marcus looked down at his daughter's trusting face, illuminated by the soft glow of her nightlight. "What do you mean, sweetheart? Are you going to be brave and save people, even if it's scary?" The innocent question cut straight to the heart of everything Marcus had been struggling with over the past few days. His daughter, without knowing any of the details of their situation, had somehow grasped the essential choice he was facing. "Yes, Em," he said softly, stroking her hair as her eyes drifted closed. "Sometimes being brave means doing scary things to protect the people you love." "I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart, more than all the stars in the sky." As Emma fell asleep, Marcus remained by her bedside, watching the peaceful rise and fall of her breathing and trying to memorize every detail of her face. Tomorrow, he would begin an operation that could either free their family from the shadow of criminal retaliation or result in his death at the hands of professional killers. But tonight, for these precious few hours, he was simply a father watching over his sleeping daughter, drawing strength from her innocence and love for the challenges that lay ahead. Whatever happened in the coming days, Marcus knew that he was making the right choice for the right reasons. The dragon was waiting, and it was time for the reluctant hero to face his greatest test. The Palmer House Hotel in downtown Chicago rose like a cathedral of marble and brass above the bustling streets, its ornate facade hiding the tension that crackled through Marcus's penthouse suite. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the afternoon traffic crawl through the urban canyon below, while Agent Torres made final adjustments to the surveillance equipment concealed throughout the room. Remember, Mr. Chen, your safety depends on following the protocol exactly, Agent Torres said for the third time that day, her voice carrying the strain of coordinating an operation with dozens of moving parts across multiple states. Any deviation from the plan could compromise not just your safety, but the entire mission. It was the opening gambit in a negotiation that would determine whether Marcus lived or died. I'm sorry for your loss, but I don't see how that concerns me. I was just trying to help someone who was being attacked. Your heroism is admirable, Mr. Chen, but it has created certain complications. You see, David's death has disrupted some very important business relationships, and there are people who are quite unhappy about the financial losses involved. Rossetti paused to sip his coffee, his grey eyes never leaving Marcus's face. However, my associates and I are reasonable men. We understand that you acted without knowledge of the broader implications of your intervention. Marcus felt the conversation moving toward its crucial point. What exactly are you proposing? A simple arrangement that benefits everyone involved. You and your charming daughter relocate to a different city, perhaps somewhere warm and pleasant like Arizona or Florida. You establish a new architectural practice with the help of a very generous startup loan from certain business associates of mine. The offer was delivered with the casual tone of someone discussing vacation plans, but Marcus understood the underlying message. Accept exile and financial dependence, or face the consequences of refusing Carlucci's generosity. And if I prefer to stay in Portland and continue my existing practice? Rossetti's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Mr. Chen, I would hate for your daughter to grow up without a father. Children need stability, security, the kind of protection that comes from making wise choices about the company their parents keep. The threat against Emma was delivered with the same cultivated politeness, but it hit Marcus like a physical blow. Every protective instinct in his body screamed at him to reach across the table and throttle this man who dared to threaten his child. Instead, Marcus forced himself to project the fear and uncertainty that Rossetti expected to see. You're talking about Emma? She's just a little girl. She has nothing to do with any of this. Children rarely do, Mr. Chen, but they often suffer the consequences of their parents' poor decisions nonetheless. Rossetti leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. I've seen what happens to families who choose confrontation over cooperation. It's never pleasant. Marcus's earpiece crackled with Agent Torres's voice, providing updates from Wisconsin. Primary objective achieved. Subject has successfully accessed the vault and is photographing contents. Multiple hard drives and document files recovered. The news that Rebecca had succeeded in her mission gave Marcus a surge of confidence. Even if this meeting went badly, they now had the evidence needed to build a case against Carlucci's organization. All he had to do was survive long enough for that evidence to be processed and arrests to be made. How much time do I have to consider your offer? Marcus asked, playing for additional time while the FBI teams moved into final position. These kinds of opportunities don't remain available indefinitely, Rossetti replied. I'd suggest making your decision tonight, before circumstances force my associates to pursue less diplomatic solutions. Through the cafe's windows, Marcus could see the first tactical teams moving into position. Federal agents disguised as pedestrians, delivery drivers, and cafe customers were creating an invisible net around the building. In a few more minutes, they would be ready to close that net and end Vincent Carlucci's criminal empire. Mr. Rossetti, I have to ask you something. David Hartwell tried to throw Rebecca Moore off that train. He was willing to commit murder rather than accept that she didn't want to be with him anymore. Is that the kind of business partner you really want to be associated with? For the first time since the conversation began, Rossetti's polished demeanor showed a crack of genuine emotion. David had certain personality flaws that sometimes interfered with his professional judgment, but his personal failings don't diminish the value of his business contributions. Even when those personal failings included domestic violence and attempted murder, Rossetti's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Chen, I think you're allowing moral judgments to cloud your assessment of practical realities. David's relationship with Ms. Moore was regrettable, but it was also irrelevant to his usefulness as a business partner. The callousness of the statement revealed everything Marcus needed to know about Rossetti's character. To this man, human, suffering was merely a cost of doing business, acceptable as long as it didn't interfere with profit margins. And what about the other people who've gotten in your way over the years? The federal judge in Miami, the journalists who asked too many questions, the business partners who wanted larger shares. Were their deaths also just acceptable costs of doing business? Rossetti's eyes went cold and dangerous. Mr. Chen, I think you've been listening to too many conspiracy theories. Sometimes bad things happen to people who make poor choices, but correlation doesn't imply causation. The careful denial was exactly what the FBI had hoped to record. Combined with the evidence Rebecca was gathering in Wisconsin, Rossetti's words would help establish a pattern of criminal activity spanning multiple jurisdictions and decades. Marcus's earpiece crackled again with updates from the tactical teams. All units in position, ready to execute on your signal. Agent Torres's voice followed immediately. Wisconsin team reports mission complete. All evidence secured and subject extracted safely. We are go for final phase. The moment of truth had arrived. Marcus looked across the table at Anthony Rossetti, this polite monster who threatened children and ordered murders with the casual efficiency of a corporate executive, and felt a surge of righteous anger that burned away the last of his fear. Mr. Rossetti, I've made my decision about your offer. I'm pleased to hear it. I do hope you've chosen wisely. I have. My answer is no. I won't be intimidated by you or your associates, and I won't be bought off with blood money. David Hartwell was a violent criminal, and anyone who worked with him deserves to face justice. Rossetti's mask of politeness finally fell away completely, revealing the cold fury of a man who had never learned to accept defiance. Mr. Chen, you have no idea what you've just done. No idea of the forces you're choosing to oppose. Actually, I do. Marcus smiled as he heard the first tactical teams moving through the hotel lobby. Vincent Carlucci, also known as Vinny, the art dealer, currently wanted by the FBI for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Born in Detroit in 1952, graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in business administration and responsible for at least 15 suspicious deaths over the past 12 years. Rossetti's face went ashen as he realized that Marcus knew far more about their organization than any innocent witness should. You're wearing a wire. Actually, I'm wearing several wires, and this entire conversation has been recorded by about 20 different devices. The FBI has been very thorough in documenting your threats against my daughter and your admissions about David Hartwell's criminal activities. The sound of tactical teams entering the cafe prompted Rossetti to reach inside his jacket, but Marcus was ready for the move. Years of emergency medical training had taught him to anticipate violent reactions and respond quickly to protect himself and others. Marcus dove sideways out of his chair just as Rossetti pulled a compact pistol from his shoulder holster. The weapons report was deafening in the confined space of the cafe, shattering coffee cups and sending other patrons screaming for cover. But Rossetti never got a chance for a second shot. Federal agents materialized from every direction, their own weapons drawn and trained on the crime boss, who had finally revealed his true nature. Red laser dots danced across Rossetti's chest as a dozen voices shouted simultaneous commands to drop his weapon and surrender. Anthony Rossetti, you are under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, and attempted murder, Agent Torres announced as tactical officers swarmed the table. You have the right to remain silent. The arrest was swift and professional, but Marcus could see the rage in Rossetti's eyes as he was handcuffed and read his rights. This was a man who had wielded power over life and death for decades, and the humiliation of being captured through an elaborate FBI sting operation would burn in his memory forever. This isn't over, Chen, Rossetti snarled as agents prepared to escort him from the cafe. You have no idea how many enemies you've just made. Actually, I think I've just made a lot of friends, Marcus replied, watching as federal agents processed the crime scene and began the complex task of booking one of the most wanted criminals in the Midwest. Agent Torres approached Marcus with a satisfied expression that barely concealed her exhaustion. Mr. Chen, I want you to know that your courage today has helped us take down an organization that has terrorized innocent people for decades. The evidence we've gathered, combined with the files Rebecca retrieved from Wisconsin, should be enough to dismantle Carlucci's entire operation. Marcus felt a surge of relief that was tempered by the realization that his ordeal was far from over. What happens now? Rossetti made it clear that there are other people in this organization who might want revenge. That's true, but without Carlucci and Rossetti to coordinate their activities, the remaining members of the organization will be primarily focused on protecting themselves rather than pursuing revenge. We expect most of them to either flee the country or seek plea bargains in exchange for testimony against their former associates. Zikushi, as federal agents continued to secure the scene, Marcus's thoughts turned to Emma, waiting for him at the safe house with her coloring books and her innocent faith that her father would return safely from his business meeting. He thought about Rebecca, who had risked her life to gather evidence in Wisconsin. He thought about all the innocent people who would sleep more safely tonight because a criminal empire had finally been brought to justice. But mostly he thought about Sarah and how proud she would have been to see him stand up to evil and refuse to be intimidated into silence. The fight was nearly over, and somehow, against all odds, the good guys had won. The last phase of the operation was about to begin, and Marcus Chen was ready to reclaim his life and give his daughter the peaceful future she deserved. 6 months after the arrest of Anthony Rossetti and the dismantling of Vincent Carlucci's criminal empire, Marcus Chen stood in his newly renovated Portland office, reviewing architectural plans for the community center that would bear Sarah's name. The morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating blueprints that represented not just a building, but a symbol of hope rising from the ashes of tragedy. Emma sat at a small desk in the corner, carefully coloring architectural sketches that Marcus had simplified for her artistic interpretation. At 9 years old, she had developed a fascination with her father's work that went beyond typical childhood curiosity. She understood, in her innocent way, that buildings could shelter people and bring communities together, just as her father had sheltered their family through the darkest period of their lives. Daddy, why does the community center have so many windows? Emma asked, looking up from her drawing with the serious expression that never failed to remind Marcus of her mother. "Because your mom always believed that hope grows best in the light," Marcus replied, joining her at the small desk. "She wanted people to feel welcome and safe, to know that they belonged somewhere beautiful." The Sarah Chen Community Center for the Arts would be more than just a building. It would house programs for domestic violence survivors, provide studio space for emerging artists, and offer counseling services for families dealing with trauma. The funding had come from an unexpected source. The Federal Asset Forfeiture Program had liquidated David Hartwell's criminal enterprise and directed a portion of the proceeds toward victim services programs. Rebecca Moore knocked softly on the office door before entering, carrying a portfolio of artwork and wearing the confident smile that had replaced the haunted expression Marcus remembered from their first meeting. Her auburn hair was shorter, now framing her face in a style that suggested someone who had reclaimed control over her own narrative. "I brought the final pieces for the gallery exhibition," Rebecca announced, setting her portfolio on Marcus's drafting table. 27 paintings, including the series I started during protective custody. I'm calling it Emerging from Shadows. Marcus examined the paintings with genuine admiration. Rebecca's artistic vision had been transformed by her experiences, evolving from the technically proficient but emotionally distant work that had attracted David Hartwell's attention to something raw and powerful that spoke to the resilience of the human spirit. One painting in particular caught his attention, a woman standing on a train bridge, her face turned toward the sunrise while storm clouds dissipated behind her. The figure's posture conveyed both vulnerability and strength, capturing the moment when survival becomes transformation. "This one is incredible," Marcus said, studying the interplay of light and shadow that gave the painting its emotional depth. "It reminds me of something Sarah used to say about how the most beautiful sunrises come after the darkest storms." Rebecca smiled, pleased by his reaction. "That piece is actually inspired by something you told me during one of our FBI interviews. You said that surviving trauma isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing what you do with the experience." The past 6 months had brought revelations that continued to surprise everyone involved in the investigation. The evidence Rebecca had retrieved from David Hartwell's lake house had exposed a criminal network that spanned multiple states and involved dozens of accomplices in positions of trust and authority. Bank executives, gallery owners, shipping, company executives, and even a federal judge had been implicated in the money laundering schemes that had generated hundreds of millions in illegal profits. Vincent Carlucci himself had died of a heart attack in federal custody 3 weeks after his arrest, taking many of his secrets to the grave. But the organizational structure he had built continued to collapse as former associates scrambled to negotiate plea bargains and avoid lengthy prison sentences. Anthony Rossetti had proven more resilient than his former boss. Even from his maximum security prison cell, he continued to maintain his innocence and refuse cooperation with federal investigators. His lawyers had filed numerous appeals, claiming entrapment and challenging the admissibility of the recorded conversations from the Fairmont Hotel Cafe. "Any word from Agent Torres about Rossetti's latest appeal?" Rebecca asked, noting the legal documents scattered across Marcus's desk alongside his architectural plans. "Denied," Marcus replied with satisfaction. The appellate court ruled that his threats against Emma and his admission about David's criminal activities were spontaneous, statements made during the commission of a crime. The recordings stand, and his conviction is final. Emma looked up from her coloring, her young face creased with concentration. "Is that the mean man who wanted to hurt us?" Marcus had struggled with how much to tell his daughter about their experiences. Child psychologists had recommended age-appropriate, Honesty combined with constant reassurance about current safety. Emma knew that bad people had been angry about her father helping someone, but she didn't know the specific details of organized crime, money laundering, or death threats. Yes, sweetheart, but he's in jail now, where he can't hurt anyone anymore, and we have lots of good people looking out for us. The support network that had emerged from their ordeal continued to amaze Marcus. Jake Morrison had not only maintained the architectural firm during Marcus's absence, but had expanded their client base by highlighting their commitment to community service and social responsibility. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman who had comforted Emma on the train, had become a beloved honorary grandmother who visited regularly and taught Emma to knit. Even more surprising was the relationship that had developed between Marcus and Rebecca. What had begun as shared trauma had evolved into genuine friendship based on mutual respect and understanding. Rebecca had relocated to Portland permanently, establishing herself as one of the city's most promising contemporary artists, while also serving as a volunteer counselor for domestic violence survivors. "I have some news," Rebecca announced, her voice carrying a note of excitement that immediately caught both Marcus's and Emma's attention. The Whitney Museum in New York wants to feature the Emerging from Shadows series in their upcoming exhibition on art as social commentary. It would be a solo show, my first major museum exhibition. Marcus felt a surge of pride for his friend's achievement. "Rebecca, that's incredible. When would it open?" "Next spring, which gives me time to complete a few additional pieces and develop the accompanying educational materials." Rebecca paused, looking slightly uncertain. "But there's a complication. The exhibition would require extensive media interviews, and journalists are already asking questions about the connection between my art and the Carlucci investigation." The media attention surrounding their case had been intense but manageable, largely thanks to the FBI's efforts to protect their identities and privacy. However, a major museum exhibition would inevitably draw renewed interest in the dramatic events that had inspired Rebecca's artistic transformation. "What does your lawyer say?" Marcus asked, understanding the delicate balance between artistic opportunity and personal safety. "She thinks it's manageable as long as we control the narrative, focus on the art and the healing process rather than the specific details of the criminal investigation." Rebecca glanced at Emma, who was listening with the intense curiosity that characterized her approach to the adult world. "But I wanted to make sure you're comfortable with the potential publicity before I commit to anything." Marcus considered the implications carefully. The remaining members of Carlucci's organization were either in prison, in witness protection, or had fled the country. The immediate physical threat had ended months ago, but public attention always carried risks, especially for a single father, trying to provide his daughter with a normal childhood. "What do you think, Em?" Marcus asked, turning to his daughter with genuine interest in her perspective. "Rebecca's paintings are going to be in a famous museum in New York. That's pretty exciting, isn't it?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Will there be pictures of rainbows? Museums should have lots of rainbows." Rebecca laughed, remembering Emma's artistic philosophy from their time in protective custody. "I could definitely add some rainbows to the collection, rainbows that come after storms." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone buzzing with a call from Agent Torres. Despite the conclusion of the criminal investigation, she had maintained regular contact with both Marcus and Rebecca, partly for professional reasons and partly because the shared intensity of their experience had created lasting bonds. "Marcus, I wanted to give you a heads up about something," Agent Torres began, without preamble. "We just received intelligence that 3 former members of Carlucci's organization have been arrested in Italy. They were trying to establish new money laundering operations using connections they developed during their time in Chicago. The news was encouraging evidence that international law enforcement cooperation was continuing to disrupt the criminal networks that had survived Carlucci's downfall. But Marcus detected an undertone in Agent Torres's voice that suggested the call involved more than just an update on distant arrests. Is there something specific we need to be concerned about? Not directly, but one of the arrested individuals, a man named Giuseppe Torino, was carrying documents that reference both you and Rebecca by name. Nothing threatening, but it appears he was maintaining surveillance files on people connected to the original investigation. Marcus felt a familiar chill despite the warm sunlight filling his office. What kind of surveillance? Basic biographical information, current addresses, professional activities, the kind of intelligence gathering that suggests ongoing interest rather than immediate threat. Agent Torres's tone was reassuring but professional. We're treating it as a precautionary matter, but I wanted you both to be aware. After ending the call, Marcus shared the information with Rebecca while carefully moderating his language. To avoid alarming Emma, the little girl had returned to her coloring, creating an elaborate rainbow that arched over a building that looked suspiciously like her father's community center design. So much for putting this behind us, Rebecca said quietly, though her expression remained calm. I guess some chapters take longer to close than others. Marcus nodded, understanding the frustration in her voice. They had both worked hard to rebuild their lives and move beyond the trauma of their experience. The knowledge that former criminals were still maintaining files on them felt like a violation of the peace they had earned through their courage. Agent Torres is right, though. This sounds more like bureaucratic remnants than active threat, Marcus said, trying to maintain perspective. These people are fugitives now, worried about their own survival rather than pursuing revenge. Still, it makes the museum exhibition decision more complicated. Do I really want to increase my public profile when there are still people out? They're keeping tabs on us? Emma looked up from her drawing, apparently sensing the tension in the adult conversation, despite their efforts to speak quietly. Are you worried about the mean people again? Marcus knelt beside his daughter's chair, taking her small hands in his larger ones. Sometimes grown-ups have to think carefully about staying safe, sweetheart. But we're not really worried, just being careful. Like looking both ways before crossing the street. Exactly like that. Being smart and careful so we can keep doing all the fun things we want to do. Emma nodded with the matter-of-fact acceptance that had carried her through much more serious discussions. Okay, but I still think Rebecca should put her rainbows in the museum. People need to see beautiful things. The wisdom of a 9-year-old cut through the complexity of adult concerns with startling clarity. Marcus looked at Rebecca and saw his own realization reflected in her eyes. They had survived the worst that violent criminals could inflict, had helped bring justice to victims spanning decades, and had rebuilt their lives stronger than before. The existence of surveillance files in Italy couldn't erase those achievements or dictate their future choices. Emma's right, Marcus said firmly. The world needs more beauty, especially beauty that comes from surviving darkness and choosing hope. Rebecca smiled, her confidence visibly returning. Then I guess I'm going to New York, and I'm going to paint the most spectacular rainbow series the Whitney Museum has ever seen. The decision marked a turning point in their healing process. Rather than allowing fear to limit their possibilities, they were choosing to embrace opportunities that honored their survival and growth. It was a lesson that Sarah would have appreciated, Marcus thought, remembering his late wife's unwavering belief in facing challenges with courage and grace. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the gleaming halls of the Whitney Museum, watching Emma stare in wonder at Rebecca's paintings, while clutching a small notebook where she was sketching her own artistic interpretations. The opening reception for Emerging from Shadows had drawn art critics, collectors, and journalists from around the world. But the most meaningful moment for Marcus was seeing his daughter experience the power of art to transform pain into beauty. Rebecca moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who had found her authentic artistic voice. She wore a simple black dress that let her paintings command attention, and her conversations with visitors focused on the healing power of creative expression rather than the traumatic events that had inspired her work. The most important thing to understand, Rebecca was explaining to a journalist from Art News, is that survival is just the beginning. The real victory comes when you transform your experience into something that helps other people heal. Marcus smiled, recognizing the philosophy that had guided their entire journey. The community center construction was progressing ahead of schedule, with the art therapy wing specifically designed to showcase work by trauma survivors. Rebecca's paintings would rotate between the Whitney exhibition and the Marcus Chen Community Center, ensuring that their message of hope reached audiences far beyond the traditional art world. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve, directing his attention to a particular painting that showed a father and daughter walking hand in hand toward a sunrise. The female figure in the painting had flowing hair that seemed to dance in an invisible breeze, and her face was turned slightly upward as if listening to whispered encouragement from the sky. "That one looks like us, Daddy, but who's the lady with the pretty hair?" Marcus studied the painting more carefully, recognizing details that Rebecca had observed but never mentioned during their friendship. The father figure had his distinctive architectural posture, the daughter clutched a small stuffed animal, and the ethereal female presence seemed to embody protection and love. "I think that's your mom, sweetheart, watching over us and making sure we stay safe on our adventures." Emma nodded with the easy acceptance of childhood mysticism. "I thought so. She has kind eyes, like in the pictures at home." Rebecca approached them as the reception crowd began to thin, her face glowing with the satisfaction of artistic validation and public recognition. "So, what do you think of the exhibition?" "I think Sarah would be proud," Marcus replied simply. "You've taken something terrible and transformed it into something that will help people for years to come." "We all did that," Rebecca corrected gently. "You and Emma, Agent Torres, and her team, even the witnesses who came forward after Carlucci's arrest. Art is just my way of contributing to the healing." As they prepared to leave the museum, Marcus reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought them to this moment. A simple act of heroism on a train bridge had led to the exposure of a criminal empire, the formation of unlikely friendships, and the creation of art that would inspire others facing their own darkness. Emma fell asleep in the taxi ride back to their hotel, her head resting against Marcus's shoulder while she clutched her sketch notebook filled with rainbow drawings. Through the window, Marcus watched the lights of New York City paint patterns. Across the night sky, each illuminated window representing someone's story of struggle, survival, or hope. His phone buzzed softly with a text message from Agent Torres. "Saw the exhibition coverage on the news. Beautiful work and well-deserved recognition. Torino and his associates have been sentenced to 15 years in Italian prison. The chapter is finally closed." Marcus smiled and typed back, "Thank you for everything. New chapters are just beginning." The following morning, as their plane lifted off from LaGuardia Airport and banked toward the Pacific Northwest, Emma pressed her face to the window and watched the city shrink below them. "Daddy, are we going home now?" "Yes, sweetheart, we're going home." But home, Marcus realized, was no longer just a place on the map. It was the life they had built together, strengthened by adversity and enriched by the relationships forged. In crisis, it was the community center that would bear Sarah's name and serve families in need. It was the friendship with Rebecca that had grown from shared trauma into mutual support and respect. Most importantly, it was the knowledge that when confronted with evil, they had chosen courage over fear, truth over silence, and hope over despair. Those choices had not only saved their own lives, but had protected countless future victims from the predators, who had finally been brought to justice. As Portland's familiar skyline came into view below them, Marcus thought about the architectural plans waiting on his desk, the construction crews preparing to break ground on the community center, and the ordinary challenges of single parenthood that would fill their days ahead. There would be school concerts and soccer games, homework sessions and bedtime stories, the beautiful routine of a life lived in safety and love. Emma stirred in her seat, awakening from a nap filled with dreams of rainbows and art museums. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to help people like you and Rebecca do." "What kind of help did you have in mind?" "I want to build beautiful buildings for people who are sad, and paint pictures that make them feel better, and make sure the mean people can't hurt anyone." Marcus felt his eyes mist with tears as he recognized Sarah's compassionate spirit shining through their daughter's innocent ambitions. "I think that's a wonderful plan, Em. The world needs more people who want to make beautiful things and protect others. Will you help me learn how?" "Every day, sweetheart. Every single day." As their plane touched down in Portland, beginning its taxi toward the gate that would return them to their everyday lives, Marcus made one final silent promise to his late wife. He would raise their daughter to understand that heroism wasn't about seeking danger or glory, but about choosing to act with courage and compassion when life presented impossible choices. The train bridge where their adventure had begun was hundreds of miles away, but its lessons would travel with them forever. Sometimes the most important journeys began with a single step towards someone who needed help, and sometimes the greatest victories were measured not in personal gain, but in the darkness that was driven back by ordinary people refusing to look away from suffering. Emma was already sketching new rainbow designs in her notebook, planning artwork for her father's community center, and dreaming of a future where beauty and safety were available to everyone who needed them. Her father watched her work and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger for having survived the storm and wiser for having learned that love was always worth defending. The miracle Marcus had never expected wasn't just that they had survived their encounter with evil, but that they had emerged from it more committed than ever to building a world where such encounters became increasingly rare. In the end, that was perhaps the greatest tribute they could offer to Sarah's memory and the most precious gift they could give to future generations. Their story was complete, but their mission was just beginning. Up next, you've got two more standout stories. Right on your screen, if this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.